Special blessing for Juneteenth. On this Shabbat, we recognize Juneteenth, the 155th anniversary of the abolition of slavery in the United States. We turn inward for a moment of personal reflection. On June 19, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger of the Union Army arrived in Galveston, Texas, the last state to continue the practice of slavery, and announced that all slaves were now free. Juneteenth was one step on the long journey towards freedom. 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, and 6 months before the 13th Amendment, which would abolish slavery as a matter of law. But we know in the very depths of our souls that there are still many more steps that need to be taken today. During the Passover Seder, we read, "B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim." In every generation, each person must see themselves as if they had personally been taken out of slavery in Egypt. We are commanded to remember the heart of the enslaved, to remember our bondage so that we can truly celebrate the joy of freedom, to commit ourselves to the vision that until all of us are free, none of us are truly free. As we celebrate this day with our Black brothers and sisters, we recognize that the journey towards true freedom and equality is one that we must all share until all of us are free. On this sacred Shabbat, let us rededicate ourselves to work towards that day together. Amen. And now a Devar Torah, a word of Torah, on Shalach Lecha, this week's portion. This week, on Tuesday, there's an election in Kentucky. Go vote. It says so in the Torah. You might not have seen that in this week's Parsha, but let me explain. In this week's Torah portion, Shalach Lecha, the children of Israel stand on the banks of the Jordan River within sight of the Promised Land. Moses sent forth scouts to search out the land and bring back their report. They return and say, "It is a land of bountiful goodness, a land flowing with milk and honey." And they've brought back some of the fruit of the land. But they fear that they will be unable to conquer and possess it. They terrify the children of Israel by saying, "We saw giants there. The Anakites are like giants, and we look like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them." They can see their country just over the Jordan River, but they can't see their way to rule over it themselves. They see themselves as grasshoppers, tiny, weak, and alone, in the face of fortified cities and powerful people who ruled the land. What could one tiny grasshopper do in the face of such power? And so they rebelled against Moses, and they refused to enter the Promised Land. And so they are commanded to travel in the wilderness for 40 years until a new generation will rise. But what the children of Israel failed to recognize that day is that together they were far more than one grasshopper alone. By the census taken at the beginning of the book of Numbers, the children of Israel numbered 600,000 men-at-arms, counting also an equal number of adult women, their children and the elderly among them. They stood on the banks of the Jordan River more than 3 million strong. Even if each of them was but a tiny grasshopper, together as a force, they were a fearful plague of locusts, and so they must surely have been seen by the inhabitants of the land. Leave aside that God was with them and had promised to lead them to victory in conquering the land, promised to their ancestors so very long ago. As a force of their own, they should clearly have seen that no army of the Canaanites or the Jebusites or the Anakites, whom they saw as giants, could ever have stood against them. And the moral of our story is, one vote, one grasshopper, makes a difference. In primary and special elections like this one, just a few votes can really carry the day. This Shabbat, we mark Juneteenth on our calendar. We're reminded that the road from slavery to freedom often requires a long journey through the wilderness, made step by step or vote by vote, one step, one vote at a time. But the deeper message that the Torah teaches is that we are never really one tiny grasshopper. We are never really one vote alone. That wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt. That there's a better place and a promised land. That the winding way to that promise passes through a wilderness. That there's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. And that when we do, together, we can conquer giants and more. This week, on Tuesday, there's an election here in Kentucky. Go, vote. It says so in the Torah. Learn the lesson of the grasshopper. Get out and vote.